us have been benefiting. My both hands are up. Psalm 119 verse 96 says, God's commandments are exceedingly broad, and He has been reproving us, rebuking us, and lifting us up to higher standards by the Bible expositions on the 10 commandments. We've looked at the first 3 commandments, and today we'll be looking at the 4th commandment, the commandments on the Sabbath, which says, remember the Sabbath day to do what? Remember the Sabbath day to do what? To keep it holy. There's an illustration in my mind. Does it look like cardboard?
Paper.
It looks like paper. Someone said it looks like a model. Look, for me, it just looked like paper that was cut. That's what I took it as. And so everybody was like, imagine, after that, they just gave her paper. And for a while, I didn't even see that black thing there. It was folded in a way that it was just cardboard paper as far as I was concerned. So I was like, okay, some people got stickers, I got cardboard paper. But I decided, okay, let me look it up. It stayed on my shelf close to my bunk for some time. And I looked it up, and then I realized that it was not just an ordinary paper. It was that thing on the right-hand side when it is assembled. And so I was wild, and I started downloading YouTube videos, how to assemble this, because it's something that allows you to see in virtual reality, VR. Some of us know what that means. You can put it on your eyes, and you'll be walking. To be as if you are, if you turn your head, to be as if you are moving towards the right. That was what the stuff was for. But I didn't have a smartphone. I tried all the smartphones in my room. I could not get it to work the way it was supposed to work. I got discouraged, so I went to my departmental mates that were guys. I gave it to one. He had a good phone. Or he told me that he could get a phone that could carry the function that this device required. But the device never got back to me. It got stolen in his room, in the hostel, in the boys' hostel. But after some time, I looked this thing up again. And I realized that I was given in 2016. And I realized that it was just made and brought out in 2014. It was a new stuff. And then I looked at it, and it was something that was really popular. And then I got to understand about virtual reality. And I checked the cost. It was expensive. And I was like, I had that sitting on my shelf, and I could not use it. Initially, out of ignorance. And then, after ignorance was cured, out of the fact that I did not have the good enough facilities to make it work. And I feel like as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, especially those of us that grew up as Seventh-day Adventists, we have in our hands a gift given to us by God, the gift of the Sabbath. We have seen it come and go every week, week after week, for a whole month, a whole year, but we have not treasured how much is in the package of the Sabbath, the gift that has been given to us. Some of us, it is out of ignorance, over familiarity and ignorance. For others, it's because we do not have the facilities, we do not have what it takes to really get the blessings that are packaged in the gift of the Sabbath. So today we'll be looking at the Sabbath, what is in it, what we have probably commonized, or we'll be reminding ourselves of certain things we know, but we'll be looking at the gifts of the Sabbath as a beautiful package from God. I found this very interesting. This is Ellen White speaking. She says, in the ark she was in a vision, and she was shown the heavenly sanctuary. And she moved from the holy place into the most holy place. Now, in the most holy place, there is one furniture, and that's the what? What furniture is in the most holy place? The ark. So in the ark was the golden pot of manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of stone, which folded together like a book. Jesus opened them, and I saw the 10 commandments written on them with the finger of God. On one table were 4, and on the other 6. The 4 on the first table shone brighter than the other 6. But the 4th, the Sabbath commandment, shone above them all. For the Sabbath was set apart to be kept in honor of God's holy name. The holy Sabbath looks glorious. A halo of glory was all around it. I saw that the Sabbath commandment was not nailed to the cross. So the first 4 commandments that we've been considering since we began was shining even more than the 6th commandment that had to do with the laws that had to do with what? With man. The one that had to do with obedience to God shone brighter. But amongst them, one stood out, and that was what commandment? The 4th commandment, which was the Sabbath. What's so special about the Sabbath? What made it shone out? What made it stand out? Ezekiel 20 tells us that, moreover, also I gave them my Sabbath to be a sign between me and them, that they may know that I am the Lord that does what? That sanctifies them. And hallow my Sabbath, verse 20 says, and there shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. So one of the beautiful things about the Sabbath is that it is a sign. It is a memorial of the fact that we did not evolve. Our parents did not produce us by accident. We are not products of accidents. A God of love purposely created us in his own image, and the Sabbath is a sign of that, a sign of creation and a sign of sanctification. Deuteronomy chapter 5 says, keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it, as the Lord thy God has commanded thee. 6 days you shall labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well as thou. And remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord thy God brought thee out thence through a mighty hand, and by a stretched out arm. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. So one more reason why God asked us to keep the Sabbath is because we were once slaves. For the Israelites, they were once slaves in what land? In Egypt. But to us, what do you think we were slaves to? We were slaves to sin. But the Lord our God has brought us out. Therefore, we should keep the Sabbath. Another beautiful thing that the Sabbath is that the Sabbath is a gift of rest. It gives us an opportunity to rest. Not just physical rest. It's not just good because we may not go to work that day. But God gives us an opportunity for a spiritual rest. An opportunity to commune with God one-on-one, personally. To lay all our secular burdens down at his feet. And just be revived and refreshed to be able to begin a new week. Hebrews chapter 4 says, let us therefore, Hebrews 4 from verse 1. Let us therefore fear, lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. This is important because it shows us that there is a possibility that though the rest is available, we may come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he said, as I have sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. Verse 4. For he spake in a certain place of the what day? Of the 7th day. Not the first, not the second, but the what? The 7th day, being which day of the week? Saturday. He spoke of the 7th day on this wise, and God did rest the 7th day from all his works. And in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest. Seeing therefore it remaineth that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in, because of what now? Unbelief. Again, he limited a certain day, saying in David, today, after so long a time, as it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. Verse 8. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day? Therefore, there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own work, as God did from his. So today, God wants us to enter into his rest. Some did not enter into his rest because of unbelief. But as you hear what it means, what it takes to enter into God's rest, harden not your hearts. God promises us that if we keep the Sabbath as it ought to be kept, keep our foot from breaking the Sabbath and do God's pleasure, then, verse 14 says, if we delight ourselves in the Lord, he will cause us to ride upon the high places of the earth and feed us with the heritage of Jacob, our father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. So, we are going to be considering what does it mean to keep our foot from breaking the Sabbath? What does it mean to get the blessings that God, what does it involve? What do we have to do to get the blessings that are in the Sabbath commandments? Keeping the Sabbath, what does it take? The first thing is a holy convocation. A holy convocation. Convocation is a gathering, like a congregational gathering for the purpose of worship. Leviticus 23 verse 3 says, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say to them concerning the feasts of the Lord. Verse 3 emphasizes the fact that we have 6 days, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of what? Of rest and holy convocation. So Jesus gave us an example of that. On the Sabbath day, Luke 4:16 recorded that Jesus was found in the synagogue, in a place of worship, keeping the Sabbath and worshiping on the Sabbath. And White says, Christ has said, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. And wherever there are as many as 2 or what? 3 believers, let them meet together on the Sabbath to claim the Lord's promise. So this is important to note. It doesn't matter how many of you are worshiping. You don't have to be 25 to make a holy convocation. Do you agree with me? 3 people worshiping God on the Sabbath, does God consider that as a holy convocation? Done the right way. How about if it is under a tree? Holy convocation. In a building, holy convocation. How about in a house? Holy convocation. No, the Bible tells us of even people who worship churches in houses in the New Testament. So wherever you may be, 2 or 3 believers, and you meet together, that's an example of holy convocation. However, we should note, okay, let me read this. The little companies assembled to worship God on his holy day have a right to claim the rich blessings of God. They should believe that the Lord Jesus is an honored guest in their assemblies. Every true worshiper who keeps holy the Sabbath should claim the promise that you may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctifies you. That's Testimony, volume 6, page 360, paragraph 3. So whereas we need to have holy convocations, we don't necessarily have to spend the entire 24 hours or the daytime of Saturday, the whole of Saturday, within walls, listening to long sermons and tedious formal prayers. She says that the Sabbath of the Lord has been put to a wrong use if thus celebrated. The object is not attained for which the Sabbath was instituted. The Sabbath was made for man to be a blessing to him by calling his mind from secular labor to contemplate the goodness and glory of God. So the word of God should be studied, but not necessarily, that's not going to be the only activity for the day. And it is necessary that the people of God assemble to talk of him, to interchange thoughts and ideas in regards to the truths contained in the word of God, and to devote a portion of time to appropriate prayer. These activities are what characterizes the convocation as an holy convocation. The fact that people come together, not just do any activity they choose or any form of worship style they like, but they should assemble and do what? Talk about God, interchange thoughts and ideas about the truths that are contained in the Word of God, the Bible, and then devote a portion of time for prayer. So these are the activities that should characterize a holy convocation. Let's go ahead. Now, in the holy convocation, God also expects an attitude of reverence from us. The house of God is desecrated and the Sabbath is violated by Sabbath believers' children. They run about the house, play, talk, and manifest their evil tempers in the very meetings where the saints have met together to glorify God and to worship Him in the beauty of holiness. The place that should be holy, where a holy stillness should reign, and where there should be perfect order, neatness, and humility, is made to be a perfect Babylon, and a place where confusion, disorder, and untidiness reign. This is enough to shut out God from our assemblies and cause His wrath to be kindled, and He will not be pleased to go out with the armies of Israel to battle against our enemies. God hates sin. What makes a place holy? The presence of the Bible and hymnals. The presence of what? Of God. So when we grieve God's Spirit with our attitude, we cannot boast confidently that His presence is with us. We cannot boast confidently that we are having a holy convocation. So our attitude on the Sabbath as we come to worship, and every other day we come to worship, should be one of reverence, perfect order, neatness, and humility. It is just as important as knowing the day we ought to worship. Take care of your children on the Sabbath. Do not let them violate it. The last sentence says, the last sentence, when you suffer your children to play upon the Sabbath, God looks upon you as a what? As a commandments breaker. You transgress His Sabbath. So once again, our attitude on the Sabbath in worship is important. Another thing that we should do on the Sabbath, we should do acts of mercy and kindness. Mark 3 verse 4 says, "And He said unto them, Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day, or to do evil? To save life or to kill?" But they held their peace. You know, many people know Adventists for what they do not do on the Sabbath. True or false? They know that maybe they don't buy, they don't sell, they don't do this. But they should also know us for the activities that we do on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is for doing good work, acts of mercy, acts of kindness. Whenever opportunity we have to relieve the suffering, we make use of that opportunity judiciously. An example of a class of people that does that are the physicians. I read, "Common everyday treatments should not be given on the Sabbath. Let the patients know that physicians must have one day on which to rest. Often it is impossible for physicians to take time on the Sabbath for rest and devotion. They may be called upon to relieve suffering. Our Savior has shown us by His example that it is right to relieve suffering on the Sabbath. But physicians and nurses should do no unnecessary work on this day. Ordinary treatments and operations which can wait should be deferred to the next day." So before I talk about this, before we talk about the physicians, let's talk about ourselves. How many of us are physicians? Okay, one hand is up. Ourselves. There are some unnecessary activities. There are some don'ts that we'll be looking at, things not to do on the Sabbath. But when we have to do a labor that is necessary for us to save life, should we engage in it on the Sabbath or not engage in it? Because God says, God asked Jesus asked his questionnaire as a question, is it better to save life or to kill? And they did not answer, but you can answer. What is better, to save life or to kill? To save life. But not for common, for instance, if a patient is sick, not for some common treatment that is not about life and death. You know, we talk about certain things as if they're about life and death. What is one thing that we always talk about as if it's about life and death? What Esau also talked about as if it is life and death. What was that? Food. I'm hungry and church has closed, and I'm buying something on the Sabbath to cover it up that it is to what? To save life. But we're not talking about common things that you could have prepared for, or things that are not about life and death. Life and death, maybe treatments, certain treatments that will help the person to recover. And we can think of some examples for ourselves. So physicians are in a different position. Most of the jobs we do can allow us most of the good jobs we do can allow us take the Sabbath off and worship God. But what should be the case for a physician, a doctor, a nurse, or I should say a medical missionary, or someone assisting a medical missionary? That's where this comes to play, that he should also have his Sabbath rest. But where there is something that is life and death, he should attend to his patients, but he should ensure that he also has his Sabbath rest. I continue. Let no man, because he is a physician, feel free, feel at liberty to disregard this word of the Lord. He would plan his work so as to obey God's requirements. He should not travel on the Sabbath except when there is real suffering to be alleviated. When this is the case, it is not a desecration of the Sabbath for physicians to travel upon that day. But ordinary cases should be what? Should be deferred. Physicians need to cultivate a spirit of self-denial and self-sacrifice. It may be necessary to devote even the hours of the Holy Sabbath to the relief of suffering humanity. But the fee for such labor should be put into the treasury of the Lord to be used for the worthy poor who need medical skill but cannot afford to pay for it. One more. The sick and suffering require care and attention upon the Sabbath as well as upon the other 6 days of the week. And it may be necessary for their comfort to prepare warm food and drinks upon the Sabbath. In such instances, it is no violation of the first commandment to make them as comfortable as possible. The great lawgiver is a God of compassion as well as of justice. Do we get the point? So in case of life and death matters, in case of emergencies, a physician can take care of the sick, but not to fill his pocket. Did you get that? Yes. Not as a means of making money, not as a job, but as a way of doing good, as a way of relieving the suffering. You know, to properly keep the Sabbath, we all have to take up occupations that gives us freedom to be able to worship God, to be able to calculate, think, and say this is necessary labor, this is not necessary labor. We have to take up such occupations. So for the physicians, they have to also be careful. They should not feel that everything is justified. Every act of what they do is justified. They have to be careful. So we're talking about keeping the Sabbath. If you have a very important occasion coming on next week, maybe a marriage, a wedding, traditional marriage, your own, all of your sister. This week, next week is the wedding. What will you be doing this week? Preparation. Even if you had something like a presentation, maybe out of the country, you're going to present before well-learned people. What would you be doing this week if the presentation is coming up next week Sunday? This week will be for what? Intense preparation. Every important event in our lives calls for preparation. That's just how it is. Even when you have to take for those taking their children to school, early in the morning and late at night, what do they do for the children? Preparation. Pack their lunch boxes, iron their clothes, help them to take their baths, get them ready. Every important event calls for preparation, more so for the Sabbath. Mark 15 verse 42 says, "And now, when the evening was come, because it was the preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath." So preparation takes a long time for important events, not so. But a major part of the preparation is usually done the day before, in many cases, in most cases, or on a particular day. So also the 6th day of the week is called the preparation day. But it should not pass the idea that it is the only day that will be dedicated to all manner of preparation for the Sabbath. Preparation for Saturday should start from when? From Sunday. and gradually till Friday, then you put all the finishing touches, finalize everything, and you are ready to welcome the King of Kings into your heart as the Sabbath begins. Very important. On Friday, let the preparation for the Sabbath be completed. You must have started on Sunday, complete it on Friday. See that all the clothing is in readiness and that all the cooking is done. We'll touch on that later. Let the boots be blacked and the baths be taken. It is possible to do this if you make it a what? A rule. You can do it. The Sabbath is not to be given to the repairing of the garments, to the cooking of the food, to pleasure seeking, or to any other worldly employment. Before the setting of the sun, let all secular work be laid aside and all secular papers be put out of sight. Textbooks, business documents, and the likes, out of sight. Parents, explain your work and its purpose to your children and let them share in your preparation to keep the Sabbath according to the commandments. In many families, on the Sabbath, boots and shoes are blacked and brushed and stitches are taken, all because these little odds and ends were not done on which day? On Friday. For doing all these things, what's the statement? They did not remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Remember. To remember means to put something in what? In mind. Saturday is the Sabbath. On Saturday, I would need this material, I would need this article to be in place, and that should be done. So we'll talk about the other things like cooking later, but let's focus on the highlighted parts now. Many carelessly put off, what's there? Blacking their boots. What's the contemporary meaning of this? Polishing their shoes and shaving until after the beginning of the Sabbath, maybe Friday evening, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or Saturday morning by 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. This should not be. If any neglect to do such on a working day, they should have respect enough for God's holy time to let their beards remain what? Unshaven, their boots rough and brown until the Sabbath is past. This might help their memory and make them more careful to do their own work on the 6 working days. I was in a situation once where I was with someone, and out of carelessness, not because there was really no time, out of carelessness, we didn't make certain aspects of preparation for the Sabbath. And she was like, what are we going to do? So I asked, is it our fault or God's fault? If it's God's fault, then he will understand. True or false? Yes. If it's our fault, then we should feel it. It should pinch us that Saturday. Let something be lacking that day. And then you will not forget the next week. Sunday, you will not forget to make those preparations. When you are pinched on Saturday, then on Sunday, it will come to your mind to make those preparations against the next Sabbath. So do not cheat God of holy time. Do not cheat him of communion because of your mistakes, your lack of preparation on the other days of the week. Now let's look at the things. We've seen some things to do on the Sabbath. Let's mention them. Things to do on the Sabbath. Convocation.
Acts of mercy.
Acts of mercy and kindness. Things to do on the Sabbath. Doing good.
Studying the works of God.
Nature. Studying the works of God. Praying. That was mentioned. Have we exhausted it? Exchanging ideas, spiritual thoughts. Things not to do on the Sabbath. Oh, we also saw preparation. Things to do before the Sabbath is what? Preparation. So in things not to do for the Sabbath, preparation would come in very well, because for you not to do those things on the Sabbath, you must have done them beforehand. You must have prepared yourself beforehand. Cooking. Exodus 35 verse 1 to 3 says, these are the words which the Lord has commanded that you should do them. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day there shall be to you an holy day, a Sabbath of rest to the Lord. Whosoever doeth work therein shall be what? Put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. Pause. When God gave the Israelites food, when God brought the Israelites out of the wilderness, he was establishing the 10 commandments because they had been in Egypt for some time. When God brought the Israelites out of Egypt through the wilderness to the promised land, he had to re-emphasize the law of God. Did he create the law for them at that time? No. He was emphasizing it because they had been in captivity and their minds had been blurred by hard labor, by continuous Sabbath breaking and all the idolatrous practices of the Egyptians. So God was teaching them his requirements. And then he provided for them a special meal, manna. Manna fell and they were to pick about an omer of manna continuously every day. How many times a day? Twice a day. But on Friday, twice as much manna that they needed was provided on Friday. Normally, manna left over the other day spoils. But on Friday, the manna was to be left over the next day and it was not going to spoil. On Saturday, some people came out disobediently. What were they looking for? Manna. On Saturday morning, on the 7th day, did they find? No. God does not pour manna on the Sabbath day. So whatever you are looking for, whatever food you are hunting for on Saturday is not a gift from God. It's an act of disobedience. God provides twice as much as we need on Friday. You prepare it, make the preparations for the Sabbath. They were asked to bake what they needed to bake, cook what they needed to cook in preparation for the Sabbath. So that's God's injunction. Prepare your food before the Sabbath. Let it not be a Sabbath activity. Now let's look into it further. What about in camp meetings? What about in camp meetings? Is it possible to prepare for the Sabbath on Friday? It's possible, right? Do we usually do it? No. But I've seen it happen. It was not a camp meeting. It was an evangelism, kind of. And we were much. And I know my sister and I had just studied these things. And we were like, it's possible. If God says it, it can be done. And against all odds, we tried it. And it was possible for even that number, for us to be able to prepare for a large number. And then I've seen it happen many other times. Whether it was me or it was not me, I've seen people prepare for the Sabbath in large gatherings, and it was possible. Let us not come to the camp meeting to break the Sabbath by cooking on that day. I find it more disturbing when we break the Sabbath as a congregation than when someone breaks the Sabbath as an individual. Because congregational sin is, for me, is worse, is more appalling, because unbelievers come to our gathering, see us doing this, and take it as what? As the ideal. If I cook on Saturday in my house, though it's wrong, and I come to church and an unbeliever or a non-Adventist comes and joins us, it's not going to smell my mouth and say, you ate food that was prepared on Sabbath, right? But when as a congregation we do it, we pass a message to that person. Both are wrong, but it is even more appalling when as a congregation we gather together and agree to break the Sabbath. The instructions I read, which God gave to Israel, should not be disregarded. Bake that which you will bake today. Sit. To sit means to what? Do you know? To boil. To sit means to boil. Sit that which you will sit. For tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. God meant what he said. And shall we who are presenting to the people the claims of the divine law break that law ourselves merely to please the appetite? I hope the answer is no. God forbid. I know that frequently the Lord has withheld his blessing because we have failed to honor him by keeping the Sabbath according to the commandments. There has sometimes been nearly as much cooking done on the Sabbath as on other days. In fact, sometimes even more, because it's that day that they'll decide to prepare the best of delicacies that will involve more cutting, more time in the kitchen, even more than it has on other days. Back to the reading. I would prefer to eat bread and water only rather than to run any risk of breaking the fourth commandment. All needful preparation for the Sabbath should be made on Friday. On Sabbath morning, if the weather is what? Cool. Let hot gruel. Do you know what gruel is? Gruel is this food in liquid form like we've been taking. Like millet, like tamba, like oats, like pap. Those food in that form. Let hot gruel be provided. Further than this, all cooking should be avoided as a violation of the Sabbath. Before I talk about this, let's see another addition. While cooking on the Sabbath should be avoided, have we agreed that cooking on the Sabbath should be avoided? Have we agreed? Okay, let me rephrase. Thank you. Do we understand that cooking on the Sabbath should be avoided?
Yes.
While cooking upon the Sabbath should be avoided, it is not necessary to eat cold food. In what? In cold weather. Let the food prepared the day before be heated, and let the meals, though simple, be palatable and attractive. Provide something that will be regarded as a treat, something the family do not have every day, especially when you have children, especially when you have little children. So the principle is no cooking. But the exception is not an exception. The broader explanation is in cold weather, when it is really cold, when the food is presented before you and it is impossible for you to eat it because it is cold. What should be done? The food should be what? Heated, warmed. Does this in any way excuse or give reason for cooking on the Sabbath?
No.
It doesn't. So let the food be warmed, and even though it is simple, even though it just has to be something simple, let it be as much as possible palatable and attractive. But when we do not have those options, like for example, when she mentioned about the camp meetings and also in traveling, you notice she said, if it is only bread and water I have to eat on the Sabbath, I am what now? Content. Content. Even if it is bread and water, it is not the food that makes the day. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Or do you understand that? It is not the food. We'll come to self-denial. It is not the food that makes the day. The Sabbath is the Sabbath. If you have no money on the Sabbath, will you be sad and gloomy? If you had no money to prepare for the Sabbath, will you be sad and gloomy? I would not. I would not, because there are more things in that day to make me joyful than just the fact that I have no money. But when the provision is there, make such preparations. I also want to add a word of caution. When you talk about the food being heated and hot gruel being prepared, from experience, the work taken to prepare one person's meal, to heat one person's meal, is not equal to the work taken to heat 30 people's meal, 60 people's meal, or 100 people's meal. If you've done something in the kitchen, like if you've cooked for many people, or you try to want food for many people, you agree that is true. You would have experienced that is true, right? So in such cases, like in the large gatherings, you can follow our example, like she gave example of let bread and water be taken, or everybody can make his own gruel simply, or the food can, what we did the first time we tried this, the first time we tried to heat our food before the Sabbath was we used large coolers. Immediately after preparing the food, we left it open for some time, covered it. Nobody was to open it until the next day. The moment you open it, the water that has gone up to the cooler drops down, and then the food spoils. The time the food spoils was when somebody mistakenly opened it. You keep it closed, it is kept warm. Some people have ovens in their house. You push it into the oven, already the fire dies. After the fire dies, it is kept warm. At another time, I remember we kept the food on the fire. We left it there, the fire died. The fire would die slowly. The fire died slowly, quenched on its own. The next morning, the food was kept warm. There are many ways. Just find one of these, especially when you are alone. There's really no excuse. You can find many ways to keep your food warm in preparation of the Sabbath. God does not give us any commandment that is hard and tedious to obey. For every commandment, He makes provision. So just find a way to take advantage of the provisions around you in keeping the Sabbath. Buying and selling. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 15. In those days, say I in Judah. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves, and leading asses, as also wine grapes and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. I'd like someone to read, open your Bible to Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 13. I'd like to read from verse 15. Are we there? From verse 15. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves, and laden asses, as also wine grapes and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of God, and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, What evil thing is this that you do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers stores, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us, and upon this city? Yes, you bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So the merchants and sellers of all kinds of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them, and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. I want to speak particularly to those of us that are leaders in our places of worship, fellowship, local churches, youth group, whatever it is. We can take the attitude of Nehemiah. We are not just to learn that it is wrong to buy and sell and fold our hands. We should also adjourn our brothers and sisters to do what? To do the same. Because we pass a very wrong image to how do you preach to someone when you go for evangelism to go and preach to someone you've been buying things for? Do you talk about not buying on Sabbath? No. That's the last thing you want to talk about. You hide some truth to yourself because you know you are very much guilty of it and the person knows. But that's a very difficult thing to tell a non-Adventist, not buying on Sabbath. I remember a friend of mine that became a convert to Adventism and understood that we ought not to buy on Sabbath. But she entered into an elder's car. They drove and stopped to buy fuel. Drove again, the wife stopped to buy bread. And if not that she had the word of God, what she said, she was at a point wondering who is right. We that told her it is wrong, or the people who she sees carrying out those activities. So it is God's word that is right. Buying, no selling, no transaction. How about transactions on credit? Are they transactions? Oh, yes. Is buying on credit buying? Buying, yes. No buying on credit, no selling on credit. You said what? Well, it's wrong, but I tried, someone mentioned and I was like, they don't even do that here in the East. Oh, we're coming from different places. We're not all coming from, it's buying of Sabbath school lessons. Is that right? Is that justified? Buying is buying. Selling is selling. No one will try to look for exemptions. That's when we just get ourselves all tied up and we become like hypocrites. I feel God's laws have no exceptions. There are no exceptions to the rules. So we're talking about dons, dons, traveling. Matthew 24 verse 20 says, Pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Why? Why? Counsels for the church, 267 paragraph 7 says, if we desire the blessing promised to the obedience, we must observe the Sabbath more strictly. I fear that we often travel on this day when it might be avoided. In harmony with the light which the Lord has given in regard to the observance of the Sabbath, we should be more careful about traveling on the boats or cars or bikes or kekes or bicycles. The other means of transportations we have. You don't pay bicycle men, so that's not part of it. In these matters, we should set a right example before our children and youth in order to reach the churches that need our help and to give them the message that God desires them to hear. It may be necessary for us to travel on the Sabbath, but so far as possible, we should secure our tickets and make all necessary arrangements on some other day. When starting on a journey, we should make every possible effort to plan so as to avoid reaching our destination on the Sabbath. You know, apart from the fact that traveling may be a tedious activity, one of the key things I hold on to is that traveling on Sabbath demands that you buy someone's service. It demands that you make a transaction. You buy the service. You don't necessarily buy an object, but you buy the service that the person gives you in carrying you down to your destination. The way this can be avoided, we are given an injunction that we should worship in the churches that are closest to us. Worship in the centers that are closest to you. Some of us have churches so close to us. I've noticed this. We have churches walking distances from us, but we go to places where we have to pay 300 naira, 200 naira to worship, right? Some persons. So when you are worshiping somewhere close to you, there will be no point in traveling. There will be no point in traveling. That's one. Then ministers, perhaps, that have to take the message to a church that is not very close to them. We should try to secure the tickets before then. What would that mean in current time? We don't usually use tickets now to get into buses, except when you are traveling long distances. That means you pay the person beforehand, not so. And if it is something like maybe a far distance, like if it's a bus, if it's a park, then you get your tickets before time. That is when it is necessary, when it is unavoidable. So that keeps you from traveling on the Sabbath. Then when compelled to travel on the Sabbath, something else too is not, even when you have done it in such a way that you are not making a transaction on that day, we should try to avoid the company of those who will draw your attention to what? To worldly things. We should keep our minds stayed upon God and commune with Him. When there's an opportunity, we should speak to others in regard to the truth. We should always be ready to relieve the suffering and to help those in need. In such cases, God desires that the knowledge and wisdom He has given us should be put to use. But we should not talk about matters of business or engage in any common worldly conversation. At all times and in all places, God requires us to prove our loyalty to Him by honoring the Sabbath. So when for the sake of ministry, we have to travel on Sabbath, and it is unavoidable, and we have made the financial preparations, we should also be mentally conscious. Keep your mind in check so that you don't get carried away with the conversations in the vehicle and start to dwell upon worldly things. Seek a way to win someone to Christ in the process. Let's go on. This is just an example where they noticed that they had looked into the journey and noticed that if they start the journey, there's a very great likelihood that they will be arriving on the Sabbath. And so they called the journey off to ensure that they do not have to break the Sabbath. It's the same thing for us. Let's go ahead. The reason why this is put here is because if you notice in the reading, the part of the reading that said we should prepare for the Sabbath, you remember we said let the bath be taken, right? Yes. Did it ring a bell in your mind when you read let the bath be taken? Or those of us that have read it before, for the first time you read it, did it shock you when you saw let the bath be taken? Yes. The first time I saw it, I was like, what? Let the bath be taken? And so I've heard some interpretations about it that it is wrong to take your bath on the Sabbath, but This is an explanation on why that was there. How often do you take your bath? These days? Some 2 times a day. Some 3. Some once. But hardly anybody who makes it a joyful habit of not bathing at all, right? Or are there people that bathe? Will you excuse a child and say you need to be taking your bath twice a week? Will you do that? No. But let's read this. This is how it is now, and in our time and in our weathers. But do you know that there was a weather and a time where it was cold and people do not take their bath every day? And somebody will be advising you and begging you, please, try and take your bath twice a day, thrice a day. That was this setting. Twice a week or thrice a week, thank you. Most persons would receive benefits from a cool or tepid bath every day, morning or evening. It is important also that the clothing be kept clean. Okay. Edson, her son, writing to her son. Sir? You must manage to bathe as often as, read it, as twice a week. Don't neglect this. So that was the setting of that time. They didn't bathe every day. Let me just say it even before we read it to prepare our mind. And that was the reason why she was saying, in preparation of the Sabbath being special, let the bath be taken. If normally you would not have even taken your bath, for the purpose of this day, let the bath be taken. Do you understand? Do you understand this in a different light now? Or do you understand it in the correct light now? Yes. So let's just read and continue, having understood this. The next quote is from Health Reformer, June 1, 1872, paragraph 17. Persons in health should on no account neglect bathing. They should by all means bathe as often as twice a week. Those who are not in health have impurities of the blood and the skin is not in a healthy condition. Bathing frees the skin from the accumulation of impurities which are constantly collecting and keeps the skin moist and supple, thereby increasing and equalizing the circulation. Persons in health should on no account neglect bathing. They should by all means bathe as often as twice a week. Most people will receive benefit from a cool or tepid bath every day, morning or evening. It is important also that the clothing be kept clean. So in their weather and with the facilities that they did not have then, what she was admonishing or begging them for the sake of health was to try to bathe twice a week. But she was not now saying that thou shalt not bathe on the Sabbath because it's wrong. But as a preparation for the Sabbath, take your bath at least that day. So that's for the sake of clarification. Don't. You said later. Should I explain again? Let me explain it. Let me try again. Are you paying attention now? And White lived in America. I don't know what the temperature is. I would have loved to call a particular temperature, but it was very cold. They warmed their houses not the same way they warm their houses in America now. Not with the electric heaters, maybe with firesides. So the weather was very cold. And some are taking the bad habit of probably bathing once a week, or even once or twice in 2 weeks, or maybe not even bathing at all. Are you with me? She was advising that they should try to bathe twice a week. And those writings help you to get the picture of what was happening in that place and in that scenario. Are we still together? So when it came to advising about the Sabbath, she had to mention that it is important as you prepare for the Sabbath, please take your bath. Just as she's begging, please bathe twice a week. It is important to be clean. Because some people would happily have entered into the Sabbath without bathing, as was common. As you can tell that it was common from her begging, bathe twice a week. You should know that there's some people who are not bathing at all in a week, or bathing once a week. So she's begging, please, for the sake of the Sabbath, or she's saying, let the bath be what? Taken. Let the clothes be ready. Let the clothes be clean. Let your body be clean as you welcome the Sabbath. Do you understand? So that is what she was saying. She was not saying that bathing on the Sabbath is wrong. Instead, she was saying, as a preparation of the Sabbath, also take your bath. So for us, because of our own context of bathing every day and every time, we may misunderstand that quote, as some have misunderstood, to mean don't take your bath on Sabbath. But the act of taking your bath and getting yourself clean is not labor. You're pointing to something. Okay. Most persons would receive benefits from a cool or tepid bath every day, morning or evening. So she did not say except the Sabbath. Do you notice that? Every day. It is important that the clothing also be clean. Don'ts, things not to do on the Sabbath. Sabbath, classes, and exams. Whoever obeys the first commandment will find that a separating line is drawn between him and the world. The Sabbath is a test, not a human requirement, but God's test. It is that which will distinguish between those who serve God and those who serve him not. And upon this point will come the last great conflict of the controversy between truth and error. Counsels for the Church 268, paragraph 2. Some of our people have sent their children to school on the Sabbath. They were not compelled to do this, but the school authorities objected to receiving the children unless they should attend 6 days. In some of these schools, pupils are not only instructed in the usual branches of studies, but are taught to do various kinds of work. And here, the children of professed Sabbath keepers have been sent upon the Sabbath. Some parents have tried to justify their course by quoting the words of Christ, that it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. But the same reasoning would prove that men may labor on the Sabbath because they must earn bread for their children. And there is no limit, no boundary line to show what should and what should not be done. We hear this a lot. Anything someone wants to do on the Sabbath, the next text the person quotes is, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. But she's saying if you keep doing this, there will be no boundary. There will be no boundary. You want to buy, it's lawful. You want to sell, it's because it's lawful to do good. You want to travel, it's because it's lawful to do good. And then she says parents use this excuse for their children for attending classes. And she didn't say exams, but contemporary times, even exams on the Sabbath. What does God say? Our brethren cannot expect the approval of God while they place their children where it is impossible for them to obey the first commandment. They should endeavor to make some arrangements with the authorities whereby the children shall be excused from attending at school upon the seventh day. If this fails, then their duty is plain, to obey God's requirements at whatever cost. The first thing is try. When I was faced with Sabbath exams, I realized that sometimes we don't try. So I understood that the first command is try, endeavor. Try to make an arrangement with the authorities. Try to see if there's one or two persons you can talk to. I'm an Adventist, my exams are falling on Saturday. If you're in a secular school, my exams, my classes, whatever they may be, are falling on Saturday. But when it fails, what should you do? Write the exam, attend the class, obey God's requirements at whatever cost. And F, having to leave school, being mocked, being tagged with names, Obey God's requirements at whatever cost. Parents, put your children in positions where they don't have to be unnecessarily burdened. Put them in position where they should be able to keep the Sabbath freely. So we urge that the Lord is not particular in these requirements, but let's look at the highlighted text. This is what would distinguish between those who honor God and those who dishonor Him. Here is where we are to prove our loyalty. The history of God's dealings with His people in all ages shows that He demands exact obedience. Let's pause there. When we read about the pioneers, when we read about pioneers of faith like Abraham, God gave them commandments. God gave them tests, things to test their loyalty. For Abraham, what was it? What did God push at him to test his loyalty? That was one. To many things, that was one. To give his only son. What other thing did God do to leave his family, to leave his country, to separate from his nephew, to give up Ishmael? Many tests. But it is in those tests that will prove our what? Our loyalty. This world's Christianity is becoming irritating to people because it is cheap. Not true Christianity. The false presentation of Christianity is cheap. Serve God when it is convenient with you. Serve God when you are comfortable with it. But God is looking for those who will honor Him, who will serve Him when it's hot, who will do what seems like big sacrifices, which with time we realize that we're not really sacrificing much. Let me read again. The history of God's dealing with His people in all ages shows that He demands exact obedience. So if parents allow their children to receive an education with the world and make the Sabbath a common day, then the seal of God cannot be placed upon them. They will be destroyed with the world. And will not their blood rest upon the parents? The other highlighted part says, and when the overflowing scourge shall pass through the land, they with us may be hidden in the secrets of the Lord's pavilion. That's from Counsels for the Church, 269, paragraph 1. Finally, self-denial. This is important as we think about all the do's and the don'ts. Isaiah 58 verse 13 says, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, and shall honor Him, not doing your own work, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. Self-denial, a choice not to have your own way, but to have it God's way. Many put off blacking their boots and shaving until after the beginning of the Sabbath. This should not be. At every camp meeting, instructions should be given on all these points. How can we expect the special blessing of God unless we shun with abhorrence the smallest sin? Listen, we should choose to suffer inconvenience, loss, or privation rather than disregard the instructions of the Lord. For the things that God has asked us to do and the things that God has asked us not to do, it will not be easy every day. It would cost us at some point some inconvenience. Some days, if not some days, it will cost us inconvenience, loss, or privation. What should be our decision? To regard the instructions of the Lord. Our lack of spirituality has been caused by our own cause. We have gradually and insensibly chosen to please ourselves instead of seeking to honor God. Christian perfection consists in the complete harmony of our will with the will of our Creator. The inhabitants of heaven find in obeying the will of God their joy, and their blessedness. We read this where she says, even if it means bread and water, I would prefer that rather than to run any risk of breaking the fourth commandment. The Sabbath of the Lord is a day of rest from labor. And the diet upon that day should be what? More simple. And partaking of in less quantities than upon the 6 laboring days of the week. Because we do not have that exercise upon the Sabbath that we have upon the other days of the week. So do you see the reason? Most of what we do on Saturday is mental work. We do less of physical work. Passive. The active labor, we do most of them during the 6 days of the week. So less food should be taken to have a clearer mind, to be able to accept the messages and have quality time of communion. The more food, most likely you just sleep off the whole of Saturday. You've taken so much food, they are not working it out. Your system is taxed. You become lazy and you just sleep off. And I want to mention, though it is out of place in this particular place, that part of the preparation of the Sabbath is that we should not overwork ourselves on Fridays. Do you notice that many times when we overworked on Fridays, we do not enjoy the Sabbath, even when we try to. We are so tired that time of communion is no longer sweet. You just want the sermon to end because you are tired. Not even the sermons that are even long and tedious, the good ones, the one that you are supposed to enjoy. You want it to end because you are weary. So you just fall on the bed and you sleep almost the entire Sabbath hours, and you lose some of the time, or most of the time, that you could have spent in communion with God. So we should know that part of the preparation is that we should work less. That's why if we have the choice, we should choose to close, whether we're working personally or working with people, to close our works on Friday on time, to prepare both physically and spiritually, mentally for the Sabbath. If we even can, we can choose not to even work on Fridays and make Friday more of a day of preparation for the Sabbath. Many have erred, let me read that, in not practicing self-denial upon the Sabbath. By partaking of full meals, as on the 6 laboring days, their minds are beclouded. They are stupid and often drowsy, and some suffer with headache. Such have no truly devotional feelings upon the Sabbath, and the blessing resting upon them does not prove a blessing. The blessing resting upon the Sabbath does not prove a blessing to them. We are living in a world of false doctrines, and we must know what is truth. You know, when I began, I emphasized the fact that we are robbing ourselves. We are cheating ourselves. Because some people use pride in saying, thank God it's Friday. Tomorrow is the Sabbath. I love the Sabbath. But sometimes we love it just because it means that we don't have to do tedious works. We don't have to go to classes. For most schools where you don't have to go to much classes on Saturday. But there are so much more that we are robbing and cheating ourselves from when we fail to exercise self-denial. These things that we've looked at, let's go back. The things we've looked at are especially the things that we ought not to do on the Sabbath. We've just said it, but when we look into our heart, when I look into my heart, when we look into our heart, we know that it is a battle in our hearts. Most of the time, it becomes a battle. Does it matter? It's not just today. Should I do the right thing? Will this person understand? Is it convenient? And I take this very important. We do not inquire what is for my convenience, but what is God's word. If Christ had studied his convenience, he would never have left heaven to come to our world to die and to hang upon the accursed tree for us. Jesus has died for you. And now, what will you do for Jesus? The work of Sabbath reform, to be accomplished in the last days, is foretold in the prophecy of Isaiah. Thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. The sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord, to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Isaiah chapter 56. The Lord commands by the same prophets, bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples. That's Isaiah 8 verse 16. The seal of God's law is found in the what? In the fourth commandment. This only of all the 10 brings to view both the name and the title of the lawgiver. It declares him to be the creator of the heavens and the earth, and thus shows his claim to reverence and worship above all others. God's law is the fourth commandment, the Sabbath, is going to be that by which we will be sealed. Not the mental knowledge of God's law, but in our putting away our foot from keeping the Sabbath, in our choosing to exercise self-denial, in our conscious decisions to prepare for the Sabbath, in our houses, even when we are living with unbelievers, in our conscious decisions to obey God rather than man, to stay at home during that class, to stay at home during that exam, to prepare that food, little decisions, little things. It is by that we are sealing on our hearts, or it is by that we are accepting God's seal of the fourth commandment. And so we would look, when we come back, we'll take a break now with a mindset of prayer. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll see the attacks on God's law, the attacks on the fourth commandment, and how it becomes even more significant as people who are living in the time of the investigative judgment. But before then, let's sing SDH 309 and then